want to start with taking some stock of how much power Snap has consolidated in AR. Over 200 million people are engaging with AR on Snap every day, with Snapchatters playing with AR an average of 6 billion times per day. Those numbers are huge. What do you think is driving this sort of generational shift and comfort with AR?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's an interesting use case. The app opens to the camera. So to kind of walk through the app, generally speaking, it's a communication tool. There's a map. It opens to the camera, as we just talked about, entertainment consumption as well. So all these kind of main things that normal people do with their phones on a day-to-day basis in one app, where Gen Z is spending an extraordinary amount of their day. So when you look at these statistics, around 200 million, as you said, 200 million people engaging AR every day. One of the things that's great about it is that they are enjoying it as something that's fun and a great way to communicate with their friends. So it takes a little of the I have to look perfect off of a picture to send to people when you can barf a rainbow or put puppy dog ears on your head. But that's now moving into a utility. You mentioned shopping in particular, where you can do things like try on, for instance, in the same exact camera, utilizing the same exact tools as you do to do those more fun things. And it's really just a generation that talks with pictures. They say a picture says 1,000 words, and in this case, that is very much true.
So AR shopping, huge key initiative right now. How do you see this changing consumer habits? I mean, the vision is a lot bigger.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot bigger. I think it's changing consumer habits in terms of try on. And when you couple that with the tailwinds that e-commerce is experiencing just in the overall macro, those two things together make it so that this is where we want to place our bet. So everybody knows, I think, largely that the acceleration of e-commerce over the last 24 months, when people couldn't go into stores, is something that has changed the world dramatically and isn't going backwards. Now that you can try things on, so think of something like a lipstick, for instance. We've partnered with Ulta Beauty, we partnered with MAC, things that you used to walk into a store to do. I tried on a lipstick that somebody had tried on 4 seconds before me. Sounds kind of strange now. Gives these companies an opportunity to use a real business case for augmented reality. So in the case of Ulta, for instance, there were over 30 million try-ons of their makeup products in AR in just 2 weeks' time after they launched it.
Snap has a huge Gen Z and millennial audience. We know that. How do you get Gen Xers, older millennials on board? And is that even a goal?
Yeah, I think a couple of different things. As one myself, I think one of the things that's great is once people start talking with pictures, it's hard to go backwards. Actually, when you think of what you'd like to communicate, even as simple as "How are you?" or "What are you doing?" I was at the Super Bowl this weekend, for instance, and it was awesome. And the number of pictures I sent versus words looking at my phone, it told so much more of a story to my family and my friends than words did. And so I think that behavior, as it starts to become more normal, will be something that helps age up the app a bit. I think there's a little bit of a misconception that our audience is really young. And while we do reach 75% of 13 to 34-year-olds across a lot of markets, actually over 80% of our audience is over 18. We also program in our Discover section, which is our hand-curated news environment, with things like SportsCenter, partnerships with NBC. We have a lot of great Olympic content right now, for instance, things that will be more appealing to a broad audience.
Now, Snap's vision for the future is very grounded in AR. It's real life with augmented reality overlaid on top of it. How is this different than what Meta and Mark Zuckerberg are proposing? And do you think it's more realistic, quite frankly?
I think that it's important to kind of note the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality. One of the things I notice when I'm talking a lot to our advertising partners is people sort of put them together in the same bucket. Virtual reality is this sort of separate space. There's a headset, and you go to this different world, and you're sort of either a different person or interacting in a different way. Whereas augmented reality is exactly that. It's computing overlaid on the world that is around us. The reason that AR is our bet is that we believe that that is where people will want to stay focused on the world that we already live in, but with this layer of computing that makes it either more beautiful or more tangible or potentially even more educational. So an example would be that we have this feature called Scan, where in our camera, you can press and hold on the camera, and it can, and when you're pointing it at a plant or a particular dog species, and ultimately it'll tell you what that plant is and give you all this information about it. Similar feature with nutritional content. So that is augmented reality. I'm living in the real world. This plant is in front of me, and I just had an extraordinary experience enhanced by what is currently a form factor on the phone, but ultimately will be wearables. And so that's our bet. We've been making that bet for 10 years, again, being kind of a camera company, and think that that's the future.
The last earnings report was quite significant. We saw Snap soar, we saw Meta plunge. They're really feeling the impact of this Apple ad tracking issue. Snap not necessarily so. Why is that, and why do you think it's taken so long for investors to have this awakening?
I think one of the things that's really been helpful to us is that we've been aligned with what Apple is trying to accomplish since the beginning. We're private by design. The types of features that exist already in the platform, in context of ephemerality, for instance, or bi-directional friendships, or no likes or comments, all of these things have been private from the beginning. So the pivot was just a little bit different for us, and we were able to work with Apple to talk about, to implement Scan, their solution for measurement, and now our first party solution, advanced conversions, supplemented by estimated conversions, and then there's third party measurements, and we're working to help advertisers really triangulate those three things to help measure. But the reality is it's going to be a journey for everybody. It is a huge change in the overall industry. We are working diligently with our advertisers to help them through it with this new paradigm.
Last quick question. How do you see TikTok as a competitor?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We love to see innovation across the whole space. We have always operated in a pretty heavily competitive environment when it comes to mobile online video. The good news is that so much advertising money and so much time spent is moving towards mobile online video that there's plenty of space for all of us. But really the use cases are quite different, with one app being more of a lean back experience to be entertained, and Snap really being rooted in the camera as well as communication. So while we do compete in one area of the app, generally speaking, pretty different. And I think one of the great things that we see in the health of our business is that for each of the last 5 consecutive quarters, our audience has grown 20% year over year. So showing that there's really space for a lot of people in this generation.